and trying to make sure that they're engaged.
Right.
And I actually gave some kind of informal running record type things on a few of the kids, just watching within their books, marking off like, just some errors from the books that they're reading in their personal bins. And I know now that there's 4 kids I definitely need to do official running records on because they are reading pretty high levels.
High.
And yeah, I feel confident about that. So does that answer
your
question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it really does. That's perfect. When you think of activities that engage students to build an understanding or skill in reading, what activities do you feel stand out in your mind with the students that you have this year?
Shared reading.
Okay.
They love it. They love it, especially, if I document camera or the big book.
Mm-hmm.
They love practicing with me. They feel, I think, really confident because there's that group setting, they're working together. And they love it when I make mistakes, even though they're purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
They love it, and they think it's so funny. They're like, Mrs. Davis, no, that's not what we're supposed to do. That's not the word, Mrs. Davis. You need to use your picture clue, or you need to, and they'll tell me, and I'm like, I always make a big deal of it. I'm like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that I didn't think that you guys remember so much. We just
that's
big
really good.
That kind of thing, but. They love shared reading, and they love read-alouds in general. I mean, that really gets them excited about the reading they're going to be doing.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Thanks. All right, so we know that reflective teachers are aware of students' learning needs, and then they assess those needs through the effectiveness of their lessons that they provide. As you reflect on engagement of students, or engagement of the lessons you teach, which students are engaged from your class, and then how do you know? And you can list them by name. That's okay if you list them by name.
That can vary by the day. It's not always the same kids who are engaged. I mean, there's some that are typically engaged. And, well, I mean, I know because they're participating, and I'm seeing them grow, and, they're following the directions. You can see the excitement. They make comments like they love something or it's fun or, there's not a lot of reminders to be on task. And then I have other friends who it's just enough in itself to just try to sit in their space. It's, some kids are really learning control of their body, and they don't really have that. So while they're trying to deal with that, they're missing other things. So they're not necessarily engaged in the lesson. So we've been implementing a lot of strategies for kids who struggle that way, whether it's bucket chairs, seating on the edge, proximity is a big one. If I'm doing like shared reading or something up there, if we have other copies of the book, they have one in their lap.
Sure.
To try to bring them back in other ways, because for some of the kids looking that far away, there's too many other things for them. But so we have to work at it every day. Yeah. But we have things available for all kids, and because I have a great group of people who collaborate, we know there's extra books here. Sure. Grab the bucket chairs. Grab some things belong to just OT, so it can only go to OT kids by law. Sure. But then I've purchased a lot of things for the whole class that everybody can use, sizzle seats for everybody, all those kinds of things.
That's great. You really kind of answered the next question too, which how you know that kids are not engaged. So if you had to pick like a typical day, I know it can vary from day to day, which students would you say are engaged, and then which ones would you say are typically not as engaged if you look at your class?
Class list to just refresh. Most kids are pretty engaged with being off sometimes, which would be natural for any child, especially younger. But the kids that are really a little tougher to keep in there, because that would just probably be easier way to go about it.
That's probably easier to list, yeah.
Okay. Sometimes Caitlin can be withdrawn. Katie. She's going through some testing right now. There seems to be some other stuff going on.
Okay.
And she's not really, I don't even know that she's trying not to be in there. She just sometimes gets lost in her own mind. And then Yusuf, and he has special needs.
Okay.
So that plays a role in all of that. Carter. And Carter is partly body control and partly just things come a little harder for him. You know, it takes a little more time. And between his maturity and body control and needing that extra time, he just kind of just starts messing around. So he needs a lot of redirection.
Okay.
Brody needs a lot of redirection. He has some special needs that are in there. Elijah. So that's one of the boys I was talking to you about yesterday that probably has the hardest time controlling his body. Like if he's trying to sit still, you can see everything in him. You can almost see his body shaking, and he starts chewing on all of his clothing.
Sure.
And like that's about as still as he can get.
Sure.
I can only imagine how far he'd get if he were focused, because academically he's still making very nice growth. So he catches on quickly. So when I go, I do have to do a lot of reteaching for him because he misses things.
Sure.
But when I reteach, it doesn't take long. He picks it up super fast. So if he were focusing and engaged during the other parts where I can't constantly stop for him, I would think that he would, I don't know, it'd be a lot. He's still doing great, but he'd be so much further. I'd like to see what he could do if he were.
Sure.
So.
That makes sense.
The other kids are on and off, within reason, I think. But those are the kids who stick out, who really have the toughest time with engagement. That most of the kids are pretty engaged.
That's good. So, if looking at your class, looking at the students that you have, what barriers are limiting the growth of your students?
Well, some of it's what we talked about already, some of the behavioral things. We have strategies in place for everyone. Some things are successful, some things are not. And that always changes. Some things that work 1 week absolutely do not work the next week
right.
for somebody.
There, right?
We gotta switch it up. So there's those barriers. Sometimes it's the length of things for kindergarten now. It's really long for kids to stick with something. Like workshop is very, very long. So sometimes just the time is, building that stamina, and the amount of stamina that young kids have to build now is much greater than it used to be.
Sure.
And I think it's hard because there's not the immediate gratification. And years ago, kids actually dealt with that much better with waiting for the gratification. But I think more and more that we get into the technical stuff, where they're using all this technology at home and it's constant immediate gratification. They don't have to wait. They don't, everything's right there. I notice each year that's harder, and they get bored easier. Like even if you have board games out during a free time, they're bored so fast, with those kinds of things. So I think it's a lot to do with all the technology.
Sure.
That way.
It's hard to see that. So we're going to move into the last 3 questions of the last section. That's about reflective teachers are responsive as they make intentional adjustments to their teaching based on student learning needs. And you've shared a little bit of that. But as you respond to the learning needs of your class, what modifications did you make or have you made this year based on individual student needs that come to mind right away looking at your class?
Modifications within a lesson, or
could be within a lesson, could be within.
Okay, so some of it's seating. Some of it's even just the way we set up furniture in areas. To help with
Mhm.
that. But a lot of it is within a lesson. You'll see like a lot of scaffolding, a lot of different groups, strategy groups, and then I also try to pull a group pretty much every afternoon to get in